When she enters her house, she screams her sister's name and finds her lying on the floor. Emotional, she comes out and starts crying immediately. The lieutenant hears her crying, comes to see what's going on. He enters the house cautiously and checks Catherine's blouse and finds that she is dead. But who killed his sister? Don't forget to subscribe. It gives me the strength to keep going and it's free. At the very beginning of the story, we see a woman dancing in front of the camera, making intimate content for online spectators. In another shot, a woman, Grace Miller, who is giving a tribute speech to Sarah Bowman, talking about her possessions and how she was killed. It is the story of his novel that attracts a lot of spectators. At the end of the conference, she takes an emergency call from her sister. Then I'm on my way to her sister Catherine. Arriving there, she is greeted by her sister Catherine. They talk about the time spent together, and Catherine also talks about her son who was at his father's house because of the divorce. In another scene, we see a thief trying to rob a supermarket, but a police officer, Aide, prevents him and arrests him. In the evening, Catherine cries because of the custody of her son and Grace consoles her, and sleeps with her on the same bed. The next morning, Catherine leaves for work and leaves her sister at home. Through the window, Grace sees a man who does carpentry. Making too much noise, she approaches and starts asking him some questions, and they introduce themselves to each other. Inspector Aide then recognizes her as the author of a popular novel, and leaves one of his novels for her to sign an autograph. On the other side, Catherine teaches peacefully at school. At the end of the lesson, she points out to one of her students who is behaving strangely towards her. Grace, having obtained an appointment with Lieutenant Aide, asks her sister by phone for a dress to honor the evening. Catherine, back at home, calls her son directly on video to hear from him, but his father, her ex-husband, Kevin, hangs up. A man then calls her. She answers, "No, not tonight, it's not possible." But insistently, she still says only once, "Tonight." She then enters a room and closes the door. On the other side, Grace and the inspector are having a nice time together in a chic restaurant, especially discussing the novel. Later that evening, Lieutenant Aide takes him to his house. At the same time, at Catherine's house, a man clandestinely opens the door. After talking a little outside, the lieutenant separates from Grace because they are neighbors. On the way home, Grace shouts her sister's name and finds her lying on the floor. Emotional, she comes out and starts crying immediately. Aide hears her crying, comes to see what is happening. He enters the house cautiously and checks Catherine's blouse and finds that she is dead. The ambulance comes to recover the body and the investigations begin. At the police station, Inspector Aide wants to take over the investigation, but the case is entrusted to his friend Janice. He then summons his sister to ask her some questions. The lieutenant explains to him that his sister was fantasizing online by posting intimate videos on the internet. Grace offers the lieutenant to spend some time at his place, which he accepts. In the early morning, Aide brings him coffee. Miller tells him about his concern about participating in the investigation. Aide refuses, but she does her best, and says that she will investigate even if the police dismiss her. She goes back to her sister's house to collect some belongings. She enters the room in question, and the inspector explains to her how the investigators described her death. The inspectors first visit the company where Catherine worked. She called herself Desiree. The company Phantasm refuses to give the videos shot, but the inspectors have the warrant and recover all the intimate videos filmed by Catherine. Meanwhile, to find answers, Grace goes to the high school where her sister taught. Some students come to her to talk about her sister's well-being and offer their condolences. She is also given a box containing Catherine's belongings. In the box, she finds a confidential document. On the way out, Grace meets another student, Gerard, who asks too many questions about his sister's death. The student reveals to him that Mr. Billy, the maintenance manager, had an argument with the teacher, so her sister. Grace, to complete her investigation, goes to Billy, who had an argument with his sister. Billy reveals the truth about his sister to her, mentioning that he had seen Catherine's sex tape. The maintenance technician adds that the video had been shown to him by his cousin, who manages the webcams of the Fantasy, the company. Grace goes to the police station, explains to Inspector Aide and begs him to see the video of her sister as Desiree as an online prostitute. The two police officers then go to Richie, Billy's cousin, to find out more about this case. But Richie says he's only talked to Billy, no one else, since he's his cousin. At home, Lieutenant Aide calls Grace to ask her to stay away from the investigation. On the other side, another woman from the Fantasy Society is still being shot by the same person. The police arrive at the crime scene and carry out the inspection. One of the victim's clients testifies at the police station, telling that he heard strange sounds while watching the videos coming from the other side, the man also being the neighbor of the woman found dead. Jonathan, Kevine's father, meets Grace. The ex-husband calls Catherine a prostitute and Grace punches her, asking her in intense anger not to come to her sister's funeral. The detectives are taking stock with their boss, but they don't have a reliable lead for the two murders. On the day of the funeral, Grace makes an emotional speech about her sister, talking about her well-being while shedding tears. At the end, she thanks those who came to support her, in particular the two inspectors. For Grace, it was only Jonathan who had her sister killed. In the church, she sees Gerard, one of Catherine's students, who presents his condolences. Gerard's mother is a senator. Arriving at the house, she opens letters of condolence and sees a strange phrase possibly coming from the killer. Miller brings her to the police station. The words say, "Desiree, you are where you need to be." She is also trying to convince the police officers to participate in the investigation. She gives her theories on the two murders since all her novels are based on murders. Having listened carefully to him, the captain also integrates him into the investigation as a consultant. They review together the video of the murder of the second victim. They find a clue about the words coming from a florist. They go to the florist. The gentleman says that it was not him, but the handwriting is from his son. He asks questions to his son, who is also a student of Catherine, but answer him he had written the words simply for all the students. But they don't infer anything with this questionnaire. Another day, another woman of joy makes her videos and, when she finishes, a masked man enters and attacks her, but the woman manages to get away with it. She survived fortunately. Bethany, the survivor, talks about the evening of her assault at the police station. The detectives ask her to describe her attacker. She briefly describes him as a young man, wearing a gold watch and muscular. With a search warrant, they check the other child's apartment. The wound sign shows that it is him. We arrest him for investigative measures. Grace sees Billy again, who explains some details to her. In the morning, the police officers take stock. But Grace enters and explains to them that the child in question is not guilty. Then she makes an appointment with the company Phantasm, offers them to replace her sister. To be like the bait to catch the killer. She watches her sister's videos to learn more about her way of doing things. In the morning, they still take stock. Grace offers the police team her solution of being like the bait. The captain quickly appreciates the idea and validates it directly. But Aide is not happy with the decision. In the evening, Grace dresses up as Desiree to attract the killer. She also imitates his movements. The police are also hidden to wait for the assault. But on the same day, the killer does not arrive. The investigators are still going back to the school. They are still interviewing the students. Morgan, the child who was arrested by the police for the investigation, tells Gerard the truths. And tells him, "I know that it was you who killed Miss Catherine." Gerard, angry, mortally assaults him. Morgan's father calls the police officers and his son tells the truth about everything that happened. In their house, Gerard has been getting short-tempered since Catherine's death, which leads his mother, a senator, to notice him at the table. The same evening, while several police departments are heading to Gerard to interrogate him, they do not find him in his room. Grace alone feels a presence in the house. She begins to pay attention. Who's there? Gerard unmasked. Grace is not surprised. She explains to him that she had understood his game for a long time. Gerard, intimidated by words of anguish, tells the truth. Smart Grace Miller records everything online. Gerard, angry at this act, chases Grace by threatening to kill her, but the inspector arrives in time and shoots Gerard. Finally, Grace Miller and Lieutenant Aide live together. It is in this last frame that the film ends. Subscribe, so you don't miss any of our next videos. These two films may be interesting to see. Thanks for following through to the end.